Capcom's refusal to come out with another Mega Man game has shown us one thing, it's that people really want a new Mega Man game, or at least something like it. Last year, the father of Mega Man, Keiji Inafune, set Kickstarter ablaze when he pitched the Mighty No. 9, a spiritual successor to Mega Man that managed to make $3.8 million funding from its 67,226 backers. But even before that, another game made a smaller, but still very significant splash on Kickstarter when it asked for $75,000 and managed to make over $300,000. That game was Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight, developed by Yacht Club Games, is a game that feels like an expertly blended concoction of just about every great NES platformer ever made. A heartfelt leveler to everything 8-bit. But what truly sets Shovel Knight apart is not how much it feels like an NES-era platformer, but the ways it manages to modernize its gameplay to meet the expectations of a new generation of gamer, while still sticking to its retro roots. In other words, Shovel Knight manages to do for the Capcom Mega Man style of 2D platformers what Rogue Legacy did for the Konami Castlevania style 2D platformers last year. The game stars the titular Shovel Knight, a legendary adventurer who used to hero it up alongside his beloved partner, Shield Knight. But one day, Shield Knight disappeared after the duo encountered a mysterious cursed amulet in the ominously named Tower of Fate. With the tower sealed, a broken Shovel Knight went into a life of solitude. But while he grieved, the land was easily taken over by a villainess known as the Enchantress and her 8 robot the Order of No Quarter. Now it's up to Shovel Knight to return to his heroic ways and put an end to the vile schemes of the Enchantress. What follows from there is about what you would expect from a Mega Man game. 8 main levels, each punctuated by a boss fight against a member of the Order of No Quarter, and once you get past those, you reach Wily's castle, so to speak, where you'll be able to take on the final boss. A nice touch is that each of the members of the Order of No Quarter actually have their own personalities that show through in small bits of dialogue before their battle. It's not much, but it goes a long way in making each of the encounters more memorable than they might have otherwise been. I specifically enjoyed the encounter with Polar Knight, who, unlike the other members of the Order of No Quarter, appears to regret having to battle Shovel Knight, and pleads with him to join their cause instead. The overall structure of the game may be similar to Mega Man, but the game actually plays more like a mixture of Ducktales and Castlevania. Like Scrooge McDuck, Shovel Knight can use a short-range melee attack or a pogo bounce in order to dispatch his enemies. It is very simplistic, but both the levels and the enemies are cleverly designed to make the most out of Shovel Knight's limited moveset. Many enemies will block pogo strikes by putting their shield over their heads. Others will be situated in spots that will cause you to fall to your death due to the recoil of your melee attack. And some of the more devious enemies are placed under spikes, making it so that the bounce of your pogo will lead to an instant death. In addition to Shovel Knight's basic moveset, players can also find and purchase magical relics that grant Shovel Knight a unique special attack or ability, whether it be a basic fireball projectile, or the ability to temporarily phase out and pass through enemies and obstacles without taking damage. Several of these relics are great, like the aforementioned Phase Locket, but I can't help but feel a little disappointed by the fact that so many relics are only situationally useful. Relics like the Mobile Gear, which gives you a moving platform to ride, the Dust Knuckles, which allows you to punch through a series of dirt blocks, and the Fishing Rod, which is only really used to fish out treasures in specifically marked areas, are hardly ever used. That's a very small complaint though, and it's really the only complaint I have against Shovel Knight as a whole. So, let's talk more about the good and the great. Shovel Knight's biggest strength is in its level design, which hits all of the right notes as far as 2D platformers go. They're challenging, they've each got their own unique feel, both visually and mechanically, and they are jam-packed with secrets. See a suspicious looking block on the wall? Give it a whack with your shovel and watch as the wall explodes in a manner that's an obvious nod to Kirby's Adventure, revealing valuable loot, or at least a pathway leading to a room containing valuable loot. But where Shovel Knight really deserves some credit for thinking outside the box is in its approach towards death and checkpoints. You see, the biggest problem with modernizing 2D platformers is that the concept of having lives in video games is an outdated one. Yacht Club Games knows this, and instead of implementing a traditional system of lives and continues, they opted for a more Dark Souls style of approach. Whenever you die in Shovel Knight, a portion of your loot is left at the spot where you died. If you manage to get back to that spot without dying, you can collect your fallen loot and continue on with no penalty. But if you die along the way, the loot is lost and more loot is dropped at the new spot of your death. Fortunately, the game is fairly generous with checkpoints, but those checkpoints themselves pose an interesting choice for players. You see, the checkpoints are destructible. If a player is feeling particularly confident in their abilities, they can destroy a checkpoint, collect the loot inside of it, but then they will no longer be able to use that checkpoint for the remainder of the level. It's an extremely clever addition, and one that I made use of often, if only to add some stakes and meaning to my deaths. So, what is loot for? Upon beating a level and returning to the world map, players can head to a very Zelda 2 inspired village where they can spend their loot on upgrades such as extra health, more mana, new abilities for their shovel, new relics, or a different set of armor. None of the armors that you can purchase are necessarily better than the others, but they offer interesting trade-offs that alter the way one might play. One armor, for example, lowers your defense but gives you more mana and guarantees a mana drop from enemies that you defeat. Another stops you from getting knocked back as far upon taking damage, but in return, makes it more difficult to come to a complete stop when running. And then there are the boss battles, which I won't go into too much detail about because doing so would ruin their surprises, but they're all memorable battles and the final boss in particular is incredible. Shovel Knight packs an enormous amount of value for its $15 price tag. In addition to the main levels, there are also several bonus levels that revolve around the usage of specific relics, extra boss characters that suddenly pop up on the world map and move around, blocking off specific areas like the Hammer Brothers would in Super Mario Bros. 3, a new game plus mode that allows you to keep all of your upgrades from your previous playthrough, but limits the number of checkpoints in each level to 2. And there appears to be more features in the pipeline if the Kickstarter stretch goals are to be believed, including a gender swap mode, playable boss characters, and a 4-player battle mode. There's also a great series of achievements that challenge the player to do speed runs, no gold runs, no death runs, no checkpoint runs, and more. The point that I'm trying to get at here is that Shovel Knight is one of the best games of 2014 so far, and you would be remiss to let it fly by under your radar. Even more so if you grew up in the NES era and have any sort of fond memories of the great games during that time.